Hey there, everybody. Welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani. We are live here on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, all the places. And we're moving forward with our book club. So for those of you who are joining us for the very, very first time, welcome. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share, all the good things to help, to help us little guys. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, basically we read some type of spiritual book, and when that book is done, we choose another one, and we just keep on going. And so far, we started with the Spiritist Codex, the Spiritist Codexes of Allan Kardec, and we started with the Spirits book. We read the Medium's book, and now we are on the Gospel according to Spiritism. Okay. Now, if you have not read the Spirits book or the Medium's book, that is okay. Hang out. The information is easily digestible, and I'm here for commentary and interpretation and to take questions, of course, right? But if you do want to catch up, simply go to my YouTube channel, The Magical Solution, and both books will be there fully read for you guys, okay? So, the Gospel according to Spiritism, quick rundown. It is basically, Allan Kardec takes certain quotes out of the Bible, basically the words of Jesus himself and anything that was specifically said by God. Those are the people that he quotes, and then he interprets these quotes through the lens of Spiritism, okay? So we're actually on chapter 28 right now, which is a very interesting chapter because it basically breaks down the collection of Spiritist prayers. You guys know what I'm talking about, the collection of Spiritist prayers. It's a little yellow book that you'll see in Spanish, written by Allan Kardec, and this is the English version of it. Okay, so basically in this chapter, he's going to be discussing Spiritist meetings and gatherings and the purpose of the prayers and when the things should be happening, etc., etc. So this is a really great chapter for format for a lot of people who are curious as to what going to a Spiritist gathering, at least back in those days, would have looked like. And of course, a lot of the inspiration is still what it is today, with a few adjustments here and there. And then now we're entering into the era of technology, and we're seeing more and more of these Spiritist gatherings happening online, moving with the future. And it's really exciting. It's really exciting to see all of it. So let's get started. Chapter 28. Those of you who are with me on Facebook and YouTube, it is now time to share my screen with you. So let me do that real quick. Boom, ba-dum. And boom. There we go. All right, guys. A collection of Spiritist prayers. A preamble. Had to turn off that loud ass machine. The preamble. So the spirits have always said, the form means nothing. The thought is everything. Pray according to your convictions and in the manner that touches you the most. A good thought is worth more than many words that are foreign to the heart. Let that sink in. I think that's a beautiful way to start this particular chapter. So the spirits do not prescribe any absolute formula for prayers. And when they do, it is for fixing one's thought and especially for calling attention to certain principles of the Spiritist doctrines. One other purpose applies to those who have difficulty expressing their ideas, because there are some who do not believe they have truly prayed if their thoughts have not been formulated. So the collection of prayers contained in this chapter is one chosen from among those that were dictated by the spirits in various circumstances. They could have dictated others using different words appropriate for certain ideas or special cases, but this form is of little importance if the fundamental thought is the same. The aim of a prayer is to lift our soul to God. The diversity of formulas should not create any differences among those who believe in God, and even less amongst the followers of Spiritism, because God accepts all prayers when they are sincere. Consequently, one ought not to regard this collection as a set formulary, but as a variety of prayers among the teachings given by the spirits. It is an application of the principles of the gospel, morality that have been developed in this book, and is a complement to their dictates concerning one's duties toward God and towards neighbor, wherein all the principles of the doctrine are brought to mind. Spiritism acknowledges that the prayers of all religions are good when they are spoken from the heart and not just from the lips. It imposes none, nor does it censor any. God is too great, according to Spiritism, to reject the voice that implores or that sings God's praises, because it is done in one certain manner rather than another. All those who pronounce anathemas, not really sure what that is, I'll look that up later, against prayers that are not in their own formulary will demonstrate that they know nothing of the greatness of God. To believe that God is bound to one specific formula is to bequeath to God the pettiness and the passions of humankind. He even brought up the word petty back in the 1800s. You see? He knew what y'all was like. So according to St. Paul, one essential condition for prayer is that it must be intelligible so that it may speak to our spirit. To that end, it is not enough for it to be uttered in a language understood by the one who prays. There are prayers in ordinary language that do not say any more to our intelligence than if they were spoken in a foreign language, and for that very reason, they do not reach the heart. The few ideas they entail are often suffocated by an overabundance of words and the mysticism of the language. The main characteristic of prayer is that it must be clear, simple, concise, without needless phraseology or excess of epithets that are merely showy finery. Each word should count, reveal a thought, and strike a chord. In short, it should cause one to reflect. This is the only condition in which the prayer can achieve its objective. Otherwise, it's only noise. One observes, however, with what an air of distraction and inconsistency prayers are spoken most of the time. One can see the lips moving, but by the facial expression and even by the tone of voice, one realizes that it is purely external, mechanical act to which the soul remains indifferent. The prayers in this collection are divided into 5 categories: general prayers, prayers for oneself, prayers for the living, prayers for the dead, and special prayers for sick and the obsessed, aiming at calling particular attention to the object of each prayer and rendering its importance more comprehensible. They are all preceded by a preliminary explanation, a sort of exposition of reasons under the heading Introduction. Okay, so that was the preamble. So those of you who might be a little confused, so the first part of the preamble, he's just basically, addressing how important prayer is, but more specifically how important it is to be said sincerely and from the heart. It doesn't matter what language it's in. It doesn't really even matter what's being said. There's no set formula. There's no right or wrong way. The only requisite that is being asked of you is to say it sincerely and from the heart, right? With faith and true belief, right? Now, the second half of the preamble, he talks about the actual book itself of collected prayers and how he breaks it up into 5 chapters. And then he's going to kind of give a brief description of it before breaking it down, right? And as far as the chapters go, there is the last chapter entitled Special Prayers for the Sick and the Obsessed. So for those of you who weren't with us for the first 2 books, they define the sick and obsessed. And these are what we would consider spirits that had fallen victim to the causes of the mind and the emotion and the physical body. Okay. And what that means is like potentially suicide, right? So that's someone who had fallen victim to the sickness of the mind, right? And so that was a sickness that we say special prayers for. And then for the obsessed, those are situations when you're dealing with people who what they're going through is very similar to what would be considered an addiction. Okay, but the addiction is not necessarily with drugs, alcohol, or anything like that. It could be an addiction to a particular mindset, an addiction to a particular belief, an addiction to a particular emotion, and therefore engaging in behaviors that are so destructive in order to feed that particular spirit of emotion. Okay. And so we have special prayers for those spirits as well. So that's basically what we're about to get into. Okay. So the first subcategory, general prayers. So the Lord's Prayer, that's usually the first thing that's said in our Spiritist gatherings. And the Lord's prayers, the Our Father, but the spirits have recommended placing the Lord's Prayer at the beginning of this collection, not only as a prayer per se, but as a symbol. All of the prayers, this is the one they place the highest, whether because it has come from Jesus himself or because it can replace all others, depending on the thought one attaches to it. It is the most perfect model of conciseness, a true masterwork of sublimity in its simplicity. In fact, under the most compact form, it sums up all the duties of humans towards God, themselves, and their neighbor. It entails a profession of faith, an act of worship and submission, a request for life's necessities, and the principle of charity. Saying it on behalf of other persons is the same as asking for them what one would ask for oneself. So because of its brevity, however, the profound meaning contained in some of the words that compose it escapes most people. And so that is why it is usually said without directing one's thought to the application of each of its parts. It is said as a formula whose effectiveness is in proportion to the number of times it is repeated. It is nearly always one of the Kabbalistic numbers, 3, 7, or 9, taken from the ancient superstitious belief of the virtue of numbers and their use in magic. So here's where the upper white middle class scientific mind kind of comes in, and you can see where the belittling happens and where like the slight racist undertones are with that phrase. It was a very loaded phrase, the ancient superstitions, right? And their belief in numbers and magic, right? So to be clear, these ancient superstitions were highly advanced spiritual technologies. And the one he's referencing specifically here is the spiritual technology of numerology. And numerology is a legit science and can be utilized a lot of ways. So in this particular situation, they are sort of bringing their nose down at the fact that instead of reciting these prayers from the heart, and specifically the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, which is like the pinnacle of the prayers according to this, right? they're looking down on them because they're more focused on the repetition of that prayer versus the sincerity of the prayer being said, right? So in order to fill the vagueness that this prayer's conciseness leaves in the mind, following the counsel of the spirits and with their assistance, a commentary has been added to each proposition, which develops its meaning and shows its application. According to the circumstance, time available, one can thus say the Lord's Prayer in its simple or developed form. So here comes the actual prayer. So he's going to say a line, and then he's going to interpret that line. All right? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And so this interpretation, or another way you can really dive deep into this prayer, is by saying, O Lord, we believe in you because everything reveals your power and goodness. The harmony of the universe bears witness to a wisdom, prudence, and providence that supplants all human faculties. The name of one supremely great and wise being is written on all the works of creation, from the blade of grass and the smallest insect to the heavenly bodies that travel through space and time. Everywhere we see the proof of a paternal solicitude, and that is why those who do not recognize you in your works are blind. Those who do not glorify you are proud, and those who do not render thanks to you are ungrateful. Damn, Spiritism be really putting the shame on. That was a really harsh interpretation, but okay, let's keep going. Thy kingdom come. Lord, have you given to men and women laws filled with wisdom that would make them happy if they would only observe them? With these laws, peace and justice would reign among them. They would help one another instead of harm one another as they do. The strong would uphold the weak rather than crush them. They would avoid the ills that engender abuses and excesses of all kinds. All the miseries of this world result from one violation of your laws, for there is not one single infraction that does not entail inevitable consequences. You have given animals the instinct that marks the limit of their necessities, and they mechanically conform to it. To humans, however, besides instincts, you gave them intelligence and reason. You have also given them freedom to obey or violate those of your laws that concern them personally. That is, to choose between good and evil in order to have the merit and take responsibility for their acts. No one can feign ignorance of your laws because in your paternal providence, you have willed for them to be engraved in each one's conscience, regardless of religion or nationality. Those who violate them do so because they do not acknowledge you. A day will come when, according to your promise, everyone will abide by them. Then disbelief will have disappeared. All will recognize you as the supreme Lord of all things, and the reign of your laws will be your reign on the earth. O Lord, deign to hasten its coming by giving people the necessary light to direct them on the pathway of truth. The next line, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So if obedience is children's duty towards their parents, of subordinates towards their superiors, how much greater it is the duty of creatures toward their creator. Doing your will, O Lord, is to obey your laws and to be obedient without complaining against your divine decrees. People will become obedient when they understand that you are the fount of all wisdom and that without you, they can do nothing. Then they shall do your will on earth as the elect do in heaven. The next line, give us this day our daily bread, interpreted as, give us nourishment for maintaining the strength of our body. Give us also spiritual nourishment for the development of our spirit. The animal finds its pasture, but humans depend on their own activity and the resources of their intelligence because you have created them free. You said to them, You shall earn your nourishment from the earth with the sweat of your brow. Thus you made labor an obligation, so that they may exert their intelligence in seeking the means of providing for their needs and well-being, some through physical labor and others through intellectual labor. Without labor, they would remain at a standstill and could not aspire to the bliss of the high order spirits. You aid people of goodwill who trust in you for their necessities, but not those who take pleasure in idleness and who would like to receive everything without any effort, nor those who seek for the superfluous. How many there are who succumb through their own fault, their negligence, their lack of foresight, or their ambition, and for not wanting to be content with what you have given them. They are the artisans of their own misfortune, and they have no right to complain because they are being punished for their sins. However, you do not forsake even these, because you are infinitely merciful. You extend to them a helping hand as long as, like the prodigal son, they sincerely return to you. So before we lament our fate, let us ask ourselves if it is not our own doing. At each misfortune that befalls us, let us ask ourselves if it was not up to us to avoid it. But let us also say that God has given us intelligence to lift ourselves out of any slough, and that is up to us to use it. Since the law of labor is humankind's condition on earth, give us the courage and strength to fulfill it. Give us prudence, foresight, and moderation also, so that we may not lose the fruit of our labors. Thus, O Lord, give us our daily bread, that is, the means to acquire through our labor the things we need for life, for no one has the right to request what is superfluous. If labor is impossible for us, we will entrust ourselves to our divine providence. If it is your will to test us through the most crushing privations, in spite of our efforts, we will accept them as a just expiation for the wrongs we may have committed in this life or in a previous one, because you are just. We know that there are no undeserving punishments and that you never punish without cause. Oh my God, keep us from being envious toward those who have what we do not, or towards those who have what is superfluous, while we lack what is necessary. Forgive them if they forget the law of charity and love for one's neighbor that you taught them. And moreover, keep from our spirit the thought of denying your justice upon seeing the prosperity of wicked persons and the misfortune and sometimes crushes good persons. Thanks to the new enlightenment that it has pleased you to give us, we now know that your justice is always fulfilled and never fails anyone, that the material prosperity of the wicked is a fleeting as their corporal existence, and they will suffer terrible reversals, whereas the joy reversed for those who suffer with resignation will be everlasting. And the next line, forgive our trespassers as we forgive those who trespass against us. Spiritist interpretation. Each one of our infractions of your laws, O Lord, is an offense against you, a debt contracted that we will have to pay sooner or later. For these we beg the forgiveness of your infinite mercy, and we promise to make every effort not to contract new debts. You have made charity an express law for everyone, but charity does not consist only in helping our fellow beings in their need. It also consists in forgetting and forgiving their offenses. But what right would we demand your indulgence if we ourselves do not show it towards those against whom we have a complaint? Give us, oh my God, the strength to stifle all resentment, all hatred, and all grudges in our soul. Ensure that death does not take us while we hold a desire for revenge in our hearts. If it pleases you to take us the very day from this world, ensure that we may present ourselves to you purified of all animosity, following Christ's example, whose last words were for his executioners. The persecutions that the wicked make us bear are part of our earthly trials. We must accept them without complaining, just like all other trials, and not speak ill of those who, out of malice, in fact open to us the way of eternal joy. For you spoke through Jesus' lips. Blessed are they who suffer for justice' sake. Thus, may we bless the hand that strikes and humiliates us, for the contusions of the body strengthen our soul, and we will be lifted from our humiliations. Blessed be your name, O Lord, for having taught us that our fate is not irrevocably set after death, and that we shall find in our later existences the means to redeem and repair our past wrongs, and to complete in a new life what we have not been able to do in this one for our advancement. Thus, may all the apparent anomalies of life be finally explained. The light is shed upon our past and future as a radiant sign of your supreme justice and boundless goodness. On to the next line. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And the Spiritist interpretation for this bad boy. O Lord, give us the strength to resist the suggestions of bad spirits who tempt us away from the path of goodness by inspiring us with bad thoughts. But we ourselves are imperfect spirits, having incarnated on this earth to expiate our wrongs and to make ourselves better beings. The first cause of evil lies within us, and bad spirits merely take advantage of our vile tendencies, in which they support us in order to tempt us. Each imperfection is an open door to their influence, whereas they are powerless and give up any attempt against perfect beings. Everything we do to keep them away is useless if we do not oppose them with a will that is unshakable in the practice of the good and with complete renunciation of evil. Thus, it is toward ourselves that we must direct our efforts, and then bad spirits will naturally keep their distance, for evil is what attracts them, while goodness repels them. Lord, uphold us in our weakness through the voice of our guardian angels and the good spirits. Inspire us with the will to correct our imperfections in order to prevent impure spirits from accessing our soul. Evil is not your work, O Lord, because the source of all goodness cannot engender evil in any way. We ourselves created by infringing on your laws and by the bad use we make of the freedom you have granted us. And when people finally begin to observe your laws, evil will disappear from the earth, just as it has already disappeared from more advanced spiritual worlds. Evil is not a fatalistic necessity for anyone, and it seems irresistible only to those who complacently abandon themselves to it. If we have the will to commit evil, we also have the will to do good. Therefore, O my God, we ask for your assistance and that of good spirits to resist temptation. And finally, the last line, he says, so be it. Amen. And that's interpreted as, O Lord, may it please you that our desires be fulfilled. Nonetheless, we bow down before your infinite wisdom regarding all things that we have not been given to understand. May it be done according to your holy will and not ours. For you desire nothing but our good, and you know better than we do what is useful for us at this time. We address this prayer to you, O God, for ourselves. We also address it to you for all suffering souls, whether incarnate or discarnate, for our friends and for our enemies, for all those who ask for our help, and in particular for, and then you can insert whoever's name might need healing. We pray for your mercy and your blessings upon all. And then the note at the bottom says, here, thanks may be rendered to God and requests made for ourselves or for others. There you go. So that would be the first thing that you would do before having, a spiritist gathering, would be to say prayers. So instead of going through this entire book, okay, they just broke down the Our Father, because to them it was like the perfect prayer. It encompassed all the elements that a spiritist would want in a prayer for God. So they utilized that as a perfect example. So now we are on to spiritist meetings, okay? So we're going to start getting into and breaking down these spiritual gatherings, okay? But first we're going to quote Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, and it says, "Wherever 2 or 3 persons are gathered in my name, there I will be in their midst." Boom. Qualification number 1, you just need more than one person. All right. There's a nice, hard, fast, steady rule that you'll see in a lot of covens or houses or elays or whatever. There's a lucky number of whatever, that particular priest or priestess has for their house. You follow that, of course, if that is of your tradition. But according to Kardec Spiritism, more than one person and you got yourself a spiritual gathering. So to be gathered in Jesus's name. Now, once again, just to remind everyone, we are reading something written in France in the 1800s for a Christian audience. All right. So substitute these deity names for whatever you want. All right. I just like to think of it in terms of just God. Boom. That way we don't confuse anything. But anyway, to be gathered in Jesus' name does not mean that it is enough to be gathered physically, but to be gathered spiritually through a communion of intentions and thoughts for the good. Boom. So that's yet another qualification. You do not need to be in physical presence with each other. You just need to be gathered spiritually. All right. Then Jesus is found in the midst of the assembly, either himself or pure spirits who represent him. Spiritism enables us to understand in which way spirits can be among us. They are among us with their fluidic and spiritual bodies and with an appearance that we would recognize if they were to make themselves visible. The higher their position in the hierarchy, the greater their power of radiation. It is in this way they possess the gift of ubiquity and can be at several places at the same time. All they need for this is the emission of their thought. Now, through these words, Jesus wanted to show the effect of unity and fraternity. It is not the larger or smaller number per se that attracts him, since instead of 2 or 3 persons, he could have said 10 or 20. Rather, it is the sentiment of charity animating each one with respect to the other. Therefore, to accomplish this, just 2 are enough. However, if these 2 persons each pray on their own accord, then even if they do address Jesus, there is no communion of thought between them, especially if they are not motivated by a sentiment of mutual benevolence. So by the same token, if they regard each other with prejudice, hatred, envy, or jealousy, the fluid currents of their thoughts and their prayers will repel rather than unite them in a common impulse of sympathy. Then they are not gathered in Jesus' name. Jesus is only a pretext for the gathering and not the true motive. Oh, please let that sink in, you guys, okay? Because I know you know that I know that you know that you've been to misas that were just filled with all types of tension because this person didn't like this person, this one is this person's ex, this person, you know, the whole thing. And what the Spiritist doctrine is saying here is that the minute that shows up, the Misa is dead. The Misa is dead, meaning it's contaminated. It's going to leave the door open for, you know, unhealthy spirits and harmful spirits. And these are the times where you will usually see a lot of fights break out at a Misa. These are the times where you'll see mounting happening, but the mounting is done, it's very chaotic. There's no control over the mounting, and a lot of people will mount at the same time. You will see all kinds of stuff when the current isn't fluid among everyone. Okay? So keep that in mind when you're picking your houses, or when you're picking your covens, or when you're picking the temples or centers for Spiritism that you want to join. You want to make sure that the current is flowing. Okay? You want to make sure that the vibe check is a full-on check. Okay? Now, this does not imply that Jesus is deaf to the voice of one person alone. If he did not say, I will come to anyone who calls me, it is because he demands, above all else, love for one's neighbor, which may be better displayed in a group than in isolation, and because all individualistic sentiment repels it. Hence, it follows that if in a large gathering only 2 or 3 persons are united in heart through the sentiment of true charity, while the others isolate themselves and concentrate on selfish or worldly ideas, Jesus will be with the former and not the latter. And it is not therefore the simultaneity of the words, the hymns, or the outward acts that compromise the gathering in Jesus' name, but the communion of thoughts in conformance with the spirit of charity personified in Jesus. Woo! Woo! So it's interesting. Yes, exactly, Perez. Exactly. So if we're talking pure Kardechism, yes, you're 100% right. So just like a lot of just like a lot of other these groups out here, these gatherings are not for everyone. They're usually gatherings of experienced mediums, or at least intermediary mediums, for the purpose of development and obviously healing and service and charity and all the beautiful things that we do, but they're usually very selective about that. And this is yet another reason why I love this particular philosophy, and I choose the word philosophy for me because we know that the roots of Kardec Spiritism, as Kardec had wanted it, was for it to be a science of philosophy, all right, and a form of communication. So it can be a religion. You can take it further and make it a religion. So for me, I like using the word philosophy because Spiritism is one of those philosophies that you can attach to literally any religion out there. You could have Buddhist spiritists, you can have Catholic spiritists, you can have, you know what I mean? Like there's so many different kinds of people who identify as spiritists. And I think that that's really cool. Anyway, let's get back to it because I'll get to your questions towards the end, I promise. Okay. Such should be the character of serious Spiritist meetings, those in which the concourse of good spirit is desired. Which reminds me, to kind of go back a little bit, when he talks about here, if he did not say, I'm going to highlight it for those who are watching. If he did not say, I will come to anyone who calls me, it is because he demands above all else love for one's neighbor, which may be better displayed in a group rather than isolation, and because all individualistic sentiment repels it. That is a really important phrase that I want you guys to kind of focus in on, because what he's saying here is ultimately you need community for prayer like this. A spiritist gathering and this idea of connecting on that kind of level, right? By sheer nature of what's required, you need community, right? And so what he's saying here is, you know, you can be a solitary espiritista. That's fine. I mean, you can go to mass, you can do prayers, you can do healings, you can do, sure, you can. But when it comes to this type of gathering, it's literally counterintuitive to consider yourself a solitary in that situation. You are part of this community in order to get this particular current going, right? And I love that. I really love that, because coming from a very solitary background, finding community was always so difficult for me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I was always moving around. Number two, the areas that I frequented, unfortunately, were like, not unfortunately, I had a good upbringing, don't get me wrong, but it was mostly upper middle class white families and children. And so therefore I was definitely part of the minority within my small community. And third, obviously I was a late diagnosed neurodivergent, and I didn't know that growing up. So I was very, very awkward. I just didn't understand how to relate to people. And growing up, it was just very difficult to find community for this kind of stuff. So I'm so grateful to be where I am now. Just a little detour from off the conversation. I'm just so grateful for where I am now. And like the people who are watching, for example, you know, huge shout out to Zelma, to Steven, to all you guys, because you're the community that I've always wanted. You're the community that I always needed. And, you know, I love you guys dearly, and you keep me sane. And I just have to say that. I just have to give you guys a huge shout out. And for those of you who haven't gotten a chance to like dip your toes into, you know, my classes or my readings or my community, you're invited. Everyone's invited, you know, so you can see for yourself. It's really, I'm an open book. And you too, Delamar. Yes, Ness. Yes, I get it, girl. I get it. All right, next part, prayer. Okay, so the first part of a spiritualist gathering, right, which we talked about, is prayer. So we have to start the meeting off with prayer. And I'm going to tell you something about spiritist meetings, spiritualist meetings, espiritista gatherings. The prayer is the most important part and usually takes the longest part. Like, it's like such a long process. And anyone who does not hold a long prayer process, I'm genuinely concerned because there are so many prayers that need to be said, that should be said, and they should be said slowly and with true contemplation and true sincerity, and not just recited and like rattled off. And for that, it takes time. You know what I mean? It takes time. So that first part of your meeting will always be prayer. Okay. So we first pray to the Almighty Lord God to send us good spirits to assist us, to keep away those who might induce us to error, and to grant us the light necessary to distinguish truth from falsehood. And then it goes into, it actually like recites the prayer. Then the next prayer that we get into is going to be the prayer for the mediums, right? Now this one, what he's talking about here, this little intro part, let me read this first before we actually get into it. So he's going to quote Acts chapter 2, verses 17 to 18. And what it says is, in the last days, said the Lord, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and daughters shall prophesy, your young shall have visions, and your elderly will dream. In those days I will pour out my spirit upon my servants, and they shall prophesy. So the Lord willed for the light to shine for all people and for it to enter everywhere through the voice of the Spirit, so that everyone may receive proof of immortality. It is with this purpose that the spirits are manifesting today at every point on the earth, and mediumship revealed among persons of all ages and every condition, among men and women, among children and the elderly, is one of the signs that the times predicted are being fulfilled. In order to know the things of the visible world and to discover the secrets of the material nature, God has given human beings bodily sight, the senses, and special instruments. With the telescope, they can probe the depths of space, and with the microscope, they can discover the worlds of the infinitely small. In order to penetrate the unseen world, God has given them mediumship. Ooh. Right? Now, mediums are the interpreters in charge of transmitting the Spirit's teachings to humans. Or rather, they are the material instruments through which the spirits express themselves in order to become intelligible to humankind. Boom. Now, their mission is holy because its aim is to open the horizons of eternal life. I love that. Let that sink in, you guys. Their mission is holy because their aim is to open the horizons to eternal life. And I truly believe that. You know what I mean? Like it's one thing to, it's one thing to have gifts, right? It's one thing to have intelligence and genius. It's one thing to have high moral standing, but it is quite another to utilize those things to push a movement forward, to bring down the spirits, the good spirits, and to bring down messages from God direct, right? Like that's a whole nother level, and that's what makes it holy. So just keep that in mind next time, next time you're in circle with other mediums, you are in circle with other holy divine beings who are trying to elevate themselves and purify themselves, and they're doing so with you and through you and vice versa. And it's beautiful. It's all good. It's all good, right? Okay. The spirits have come to instruct people about their future destiny and to lead them along the pathway of the good, but not to spare them the physical effort they must exert in this world for their advancement, nor to favor their ambition and cupidity. This is what mediums must understand very clearly so that they do not make bad use of their faculties. Those who grasp the seriousness of the mandate with which they have been vested fulfill it religiously. Their conscience would reprove them for a sacrilegious act if, for themselves or for others, they were to transform into a form of entertainment or distraction, distraction a faculty given with such a serious purpose, and which puts them into communications with beings beyond the grave. As interpreters of the Spirit's teachings, mediums must perform an important role in the moral transformation that is taking place. The services they can render are due to the good direction they give their faculty, because those who are on a bad pathway are more harmful than useful to Spiritism's cause. Due to the bad impressions they produce, they have hampered more than one conversation. Thus, they will be asked to give an account of the use they have made of a faculty that was given to them for the purpose of doing good to their neighbor. Mediums who want to retain the assistance of good spirits must work for their own advancement. Those who want to see their faculty grow and develop must themselves grow morally and abstain from anything that might divert them from their providential objective. If good spirits sometimes make use of imperfect instruments, it is to give good counsel and to endeavor to lead them to the good. However, if they encounter hardened hearts and if their warnings go unheeded, they withdraw, and then the field is wide open to bad spirits. Experience has shown that among those who are not able to profit from the counsels they receive from good spirits, communications that have for some time displayed brilliance degenerate little by little and end up falling into error, verbosity, or foolishness, an incontestable sign that good spirits have taken their leave. And this is why I always say, this is the time where the true mediums, the true prophesiers will be seen, and the charlatans will be put to light. I'm feeling it and I'm seeing it already. Feeling it and seeing it already in the community. So if that's the case, y'all, listen, just be light. Be light, because light doesn't cast shadow, and there's nothing for you to worry about, right? Obtaining the assistance of good spirits and averting frivolous and deceitful ones should be the objective of constant effort by all serious mediums. Otherwise, mediumship is a barren faculty that may even cause harm to the one who possesses it, because it may degenerate into a dangerous obsession. We talked about this before, too. We talked about how mediumship and this idea of traversing the spirit realms and sharing currents with spiritual entities. If you yourself are doing this without understanding the balance, without understanding how to get yourself back, without doing it for pure intentions, you could easily fall into obtaining attachments, parasites, gausas, all of these things that we would consider harmful, and eventually move into activities such as obsession and things like that. All of that can happen, and that's what they're saying here. Like once you've repelled your good spirits away, that's all that's left, and misery loves company, and that's why you'll attract it, right? So rather than flattering yourself for a faculty that does not belong to you, since it may be taken from you, mediums who understand their duty attribute it to God and the good things that they obtain. If their communications merit praise, they do not flatter themselves because of it, for they know that such communications are independent of their personal merit, and they render thanks to God for having allowed good spirits to manifest through them. If these communications give rise to criticism, they are not offended by it, because they are not the work of their own spirit. They tell themselves that they have not been good instruments and that they have not possessed all the qualities needed to oppose the interference of bad spirits, and consequently they seek to acquire such qualities, and through prayer they ask for the strength that they lack. Okay, and then they recite the prayer. So that whole chunk was describing what a medium is and what their purpose is in that space, in that spiritual gathering space. And then there's the prayer to the medium, which basically says all of this in a very poetic way, and it calls forth your abilities and all the mediums that are present in the space, the abilities forward, so that the current can then be created. Okay. Okay. So now we move on to the prayer for oneself. So this is basically, we're going to be talking here about the prayer to, like some people call it the ori, or your higher self, or your highest consciousness. Some people will call it one's guardian spirit, the main guardian of the head. Some people will refer to it as their protector spirit. Whatever you refer to it as, it's identified here as the prayer to oneself, right? So here we go. We're going to go into what this actually means before we get into the prayer. So we all have a good spirit who has been connected to us ever since we were born, and who has kept us under watch and care. With us, it performs the mission of a father with its child, that of leading us on the pathway of the good and of progress through life's trials. It is happy when we respond to its solicitude, and it suffers when it sees us succumb. Its name matters very little to us, because it might have a name not known on the earth, and thus we evoke it as our guardian angel, our good spirit. We may even evoke it by using the name of any high order spirit with whom we feel most particularly attuned with. Besides our guardian angel, who is always a high order spirit, we have a protector spirit, who, though less evolved, are nonetheless good and benevolent. They may be relatives or friends, or sometimes they may be individuals whom we have not known at all in our current lifetimes. They assist us with their counsels and frequently with their intervention in the actions of our lives. Then there's the sympathetic spirits, are those who are connected with us by a certain similarity of tastes and tendencies. They may either be good or bad according to the nature of their inclinations that attract them to us. Then tempter spirits make efforts to lead us away from the pathway of the good by suggesting bad thoughts to us. They take advantage of all our weaknesses as if they were open doors, giving them access to our soul. There are those who hound us as if we were their prey, but they withdraw once they realize their powerlessness in fighting against our will. God has given us a principal and superior guide in our guardian angel, and then secondary guides in our protector and our familiar spirits. However, it is wrong to believe that we unavoidably have a bad spirit who has been placed next to us to counterbalance good influences. Bad spirits come intentionally according to how much access they have to our weakness, and according to our negligence in following the inspirations of good spirits. Therefore, we ourselves are the ones who attract them. The truth of the matter is that no one is ever denied the assistance of good spirits, and that it depends on us to repel the bad ones. Because of their imperfections, human beings are the primary cause of the miseries they must bear, and they are most frequently their own bad spirit. The prayer to the guardian angel and protector spirits should have the aim of soliciting their intervention before God, asking them for the strength to resist bad suggestions and for their assistance with the needs of life. And then, of course, it gets into the prayer, which I'm not going to read. Then we have the prayer that keeps the bad spirits away, right? So this is another part of the spiritual gathering. So all of these little chunks that we're talking about are part of a spiritist gathering and what must be said and done during a spiritist gathering. So first we're going to quote Matthew chapter 23, verse 25 to 28. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, while inside they are full of plunder and impurity. Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and plate so that the outside may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside to men's eyes, but which inside are full of every sort of corruption. Thus, on the outside you seem just in men's eyes, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Matthew had something to say. Shit. But basically, bad spirits go only where they find what satisfies their wickedness. In order to keep them at bay, it is not enough to ask them or even to order them to stay away. One must rid oneself of what attracts them. Bad spirits sniff out the wounds of the soul, just like a fly sniffs out the wounds of the body. Just as you would cleanse your body to keep vermin away, cleanse your soul of its impurities to keep evil bad spirits away. Since we live in a world swarming with bad spirits, the good qualities of the heart do not always shelter us from their attempts, but they do give us the strength to resist them. So here I just want to sort of interject, okay? Because again, written in the 1800s for upper white middle European class who are mostly of Christian audience, right? And what usually happens in that type of world? A lot of fear-based stuff, right? The threat of hell, purgatory. We got a lot of stuff. We got a lot of stuff going on around this time. And so the language definitely the language of these books mirror these types of ideas. So it's really important for you to understand that, yes, the spirit is not wrong saying that these bad spirits are pretty much our own problem. But where it gets a little fishy is you could easily interpret that as victim blaming, right? You could easily say, well, yeah, no wonder why you have it. Like, you're all fucked up. Like, yeah, no wonder. That's not the purpose of this, okay? The purpose of identifying your own personal bullshit and doing your own personal shadow work, right, is to purify that from your body. You want to get that shit out. Because whether you believe it or not, like attracts like. Misery loves company, right? And so, and they're not saying that just because you don't cleanse or just because you have a day of depression, like, they're not talking about those moments that all of a sudden bad spirits are just going to come out of nowhere and just latch onto you. That's not what they're saying here. They're referencing the fact that once you, due to your insincerity, due to your inability to share space with people, due to your repelling of your good spirits from your court and away from you, due to all of that, you are now vulnerable to the bad spirits that are constantly, the parasites and the shit that's constantly around, that's jumping from person to person. You're now vulnerable to that. Then you yourself have your own shadow bullshit that's in there that is now predisposing you to very specific parasites. Okay, so this is why it's important to engage in spiritual hygiene, not just as a emergency reaction to being, attacked by a spirit. It needs to be done as a maintenance, as a spiritual regimen and routine. Your spiritual hygiene should be a maintenance for you that's done regularly. Okay, and especially if you identify as a medium, a spiritista, spiritist, spiritualist, because we work with spirits, because we work with the dead, because we work in these different spirit realms. And the more closer you are to your indigenous practices too, because again, this is a philosophy that you can attach to anything. If you also practice indigenous practices and understand how you can actually take your spirit out of your body and send it to those spiritual realms and dimensions, that's a whole nother level of protection and hygiene that you need to do for yourself in order to maintain homeostasis and specifically to maintain safety. Okay. So that's what they're talking about here. Like, I don't want you to get it twisted. I don't want you to think that because you have depression, now you are just a sucker for this. Or because you had a fight with your mom and you're just holding on a grudge for like 2 or 3 days, that now you're going to get attacked by something. No. Okay. Because again, everyone has good spirits. Everyone has their guardian spirit, their protector spirits. So unless you've actively pushed those motherfuckers away, there's no reason for you to have this constant paranoia or fear, which a lot of people do. And I want to put that to rest. Okay. So now another prayer that we will often engage in is to ask for a defect to be corrected, right? So defects meaning, not necessarily, our physical body. We're not talking about a disability per se, as defined by the DSM. But we are talking about, those spiritual imperfections, okay, that we want to redeem, right? So our bad instincts are the result of the imperfections of our spirits and not our body. Otherwise, humankind would be exempt from any kind of responsibility. Our advancement depends on us because all people who enjoy the use of their faculties in all things have the freedom to do or not to do. They lack only the will to do the good. Okay? So, your predisposition, your willingness to do something or to not do something, that is the deciding factor in terms of a deficit, a spiritual deficit. Will you engage in charity? Will you grow? Will you forgive? Do you have faith? All of this versus saying no to all of that. When you say no to all of that, now we have a deficit that we need to get corrected, and we pray for this, right? Then we have a prayer to ask for strength to resist any kind of temptations, because as we know, temptations are constant, right? They're all the time. Any of us who's been on a diet knows what that feels like, right? So every bad thought could have two sources, according to Spiritism: the soul's own imperfection or a sinister influence that acts upon it. In the later case, it is always the indication of a weakness that makes us predisposed to receive such an influence, and is thus an indication of an imperfect soul anyway. Consequently, those who have failed cannot use the excuse of having been influenced by an outside spirit, for such a spirit could not have had induced anyone to commit wrong if it had judged the person inaccessible to that temptation in the first place. So that's according to Spiritism. That's what they're trying to explain here. So again, it's not about victim blaming. It's about your predisposition, what you will most likely be willing to do. If you are most likely to be like, fuck that, I'm not going to do that, then this is what we're going to need strength for, right? So then in the next part, they say, when a bad thought arises in us, we can thus assume that a malevolent spirit is inducing us to wrongdoing, which we are as completely free to yield to or resist as if a living person were tempting us to do something. At the same time, we should imagine our guardian angel or protector spirit who, on its parts, combats the bad influences in us and anxiously awaits our decision. Our hesitation to commit wrongdoing is the voice of a good spirit making itself heard in our conscience. So like it's the literal like angel demon on the shoulder situation is what they're describing here, but ultimately you have the free will. A thought is acknowledged to be bad when it deters us from charity, which is the basis of all moral truth. When the thought's source is pride, vanity, or selfishness, when acting on it may cause any harm to another person, and lastly, when it entices us to do unto others what we would not like them to do unto us. Okay, and then we pray for that. Then we have a prayer for our thanksgiving over a victory, over a temptation, right? So another thing that all of us love to do when we gather is we also love to celebrate our wins together, right? Like, we engage in mediumship. Yeah, we heal people of their causas. Yeah, we say prayers and do sermons and all that fun stuff, right? But, in those moments when someone comes to space and says, I am 6 months clean, or I am whatever, we want to celebrate that. And especially when it's a temptation that really was something that plagued our spirit for a very, very long time, right? Those who resist a temptation owe it to the help of their good spirits, whose voice they have listened to, and they should thank God and their guardian angel. And so in those moments, the thanksgiving is to the person for doing the work, for listening to their spirits. It's to their good spirits who gave them the protection, gave them the musings and the thoughts to help them to stay away from that temptation. All right. And their guardian angel, of course. Another prayer that we have is to ask for counsel. We utilize this prayer whenever we are unsure about doing or not doing something. We should, before anything else, ask ourselves the following questions. Can the thing I am hesitant to do cause harm to someone else? Might it be useful to someone? If someone else were to do it to me, would I be happy about it? Right? So if these things, if the thing has to do only with oneself, one should balance the sum of the personal advantages and disadvantages that may result from it. If it has to do with other persons, and if doing the good for one person might cause harm to another, one must also weigh the sum of the good and harm in order to abstain or to act. And lastly, even for the best things, one must still consider the opportunity and the surrounding circumstances. For a thing that is good per se may lead to bad results in an unskilled hand, if not done with prudence and circumspection. Before undertaking it, one ought to consider one's willpower and the means of carrying it out. In all cases, one can always ask for the assistance of one's protector spirits, recalling this wise maxim: if in doubt, abstain. So this is yet another thing that I talk to my students about constantly. It's about not rushing ahead, right? And there's a lot of reasons as to why we advise you to not rush ahead, especially if you are someone who is interested in becoming a healer or someone who is interested in being mounted. These are activities that take a lot out of the body and also take a lot of spirit energy from your spirits. So if you haven't developed a big, strong team yet, if you haven't developed a strong, good relationship with your court yet, if you haven't gotten that connection yet, you're putting yourself at a disservice if you engage in these activities before you are ready, to the point where it could actually be harmful for you. It could be detrimental for you. And if it's a healing activity, it could be detrimental to the person that you're trying to heal as well. So this is why we always say, if you're unsure, if you're not feeling it that day, whatever, don't do it. Just don't do it. We have prayers for life's affliction. Moving on to the next part. So during life's afflictions, right? So this is where we can ask God for earthly favors, right? And he may grant them to us if they have a useful and serious purpose. However, since we judge the usefulness of things from our own point of view, and since our vision is limited to the present, we do not always see the bad side of what we desire. God, who sees better than we do and who wants only our good, may thus refuse us, just as a father refuses to give his child what might be harmful. If what we have asked for is not granted to us, we must not become discouraged because of it. On the contrary, we have to think that the refusal of what we desire is imposed on us as a trial or expiation, and that our recompense will be proportional to the resignation with which we will have borne it. Okay? Any questions on that one? Ooh. Okay. We also do a prayer of thanksgiving for a favor received, right? So one must not consider as happy events only matters of great importance. Those least important in appearance are often the ones that have the most influence on our destiny. People easily forget the good and remember instead what afflicts them. So if we recall the benefits we have received day in and day out without having asked for them, we would often be surprised at the number that have slipped our memory, and we would be humbled by our ingratitude. Each night, as we lift our soul to God, we should remember the blessings granted to us during the day and give thanks for them. Moreover, it is especially at the moment when we feel the effects of God's goodness and protection that we should, in a spontaneous gesture, render thanks. In this case, it is sufficient to elevate a thought attributing the benefit to God without it being necessary to disrupt our work. God's benefits do not consist only in material things. We should also give thanks for the good ideas and the happy inspirations that are suggested to us. While the proud attribute the merit to themselves and disbelievers attribute them to chance, those who have faith render thanks to God and the good spirits. For this, long phrases are not necessary. Thank you, my God, for the good thought you have inspired with me. Says more than a lot of words. The spontaneous impulse that makes us attribute to God the good that comes to us bears witness to a habit of acknowledgement and humility that attracts the sympathy of good spirits. So in the same way we were talking about how, you actively sort of pushing away your good spirits and actively kind of like, being a dick, sort of attracts, bad spirits. In the opposite, you saying these prayers in sincerity, and you giving thanks every night before bed for the day that you had and giving thanks to that directly to God as opposed to just giving thanks just to yourself, because it is important to acknowledge yourself. I think we, those of us who have a Catholic background, a lot of us have a lot of PTSD around this idea of pride, right? And having pride within ourselves, oftentimes being told that we are selfish and whatnot. But the reality is that pride as a word is not harmful, right? And we know as spiritists, as spiritistas, psychic mediums, and people who understand all of these different doctrines, that pride itself is an act, but it is the incessant pride, right? It's me all the time type of pride. That's the problem, right? And so when I say to you, if you had a great day and you got a promotion because you worked hard, bitch, go to the bar, buy yourself that drink, get your nails done, give yourself the kiki and the ha because you deserve it for sure. But make sure you give thanks to God as well, right? Because we know all things through, right? That's what is being said here. All things through, right? There's also a prayer for the act of submission and resignation, right? So when a reason for affliction strikes us, if we look for its cause, we will often find that it is the consequence of our imprudence and lack of foresight or a previous action. In this case, we must attribute it only to ourselves. If the cause of a misfortune is independent of any participation on our part, it is either a trial for this life or an expiation of a past existence. In the later case, the nature of the expiation can enable us to understand the nature of the wrong, because we are always punished wherein we have sinned. So again, he's talking about here cause and effect. He's talking about the the equidistant cause and effect, meaning however far it goes this way, it's going to go the exact same amount in the other direction. So the punishment will fit the crime, the blessing will fit the merit. Got it? So in this particular case, you know, what they're saying here is 99% of the time when we have misfortune or bad luck, or you know, what we would consider like, holy shit, you know, what's happening, it's usually because of our own lack of foresight. It's usually because we ourselves are not following our own, you know, moral compass that we've created for ourselves under the influence of good spirits and in accordance with the laws that God had set out for us, right? Those misfortunes will make themselves known. Obviously, they're just a natural consequence of that, right? Now, in the rare case, what they're saying here, in the rare case that you're asking for submission and resignation to get rid of these things, of these misfortunes from a previous life, then just know that the answer to getting rid of it, the answer to elevating out of it, the answer to the relief of suffering from it is usually held within the problem itself. Why? Because of the pendulum swing, right? The punishment will fit the crime, the blessing will fit the merit. So if you are going through something that is a consequence of something else, look at that thing to find the answer as to how you can get yourself out of it. Okay? And that is what you're praying for when you pray the act of submission and resignation. Now, regarding what afflicts us, generally we see only present ill and not the final favorable consequences that it may hold. Frequently, the good comes after a temporary ill, just as the healing of a sickness is the result of the painful means that have been employed to obtain it. In all cases, we should submit to God's will and courageously bear life's tribulations if we want them to be taken into account, and so that these words of Christ may be applicable to us. Blessed are those who suffer. Ding, 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 ding. This is where I'm going to interject and say I call bullshit. Now, look, I love Spiritism. I love all of these documents, and I have all respect. But, you know, it's really tough. It's really, really, really tough to tell a starving child to submit to God's will and courageously bear their tribulation, because it is temporary, and that someday in some other life it'll all be good, and that your suffering has purpose. Like who in their right mind would say that to someone suffering like that? No one would say that. Now, I get the sentiment, and those of us who work the mystic arts and who identify as a mystical practitioner, right? We understand the sentiment of this, and we get this, and we understand it's not victim blaming, and we understand that it's not about, you know, telling someone that their suffering is good or whatever. Like, it's not about that. But to the average lay person, the dude working the 9 to 5, the mom with her kids, this is a hard pill to swallow. So I'm going to put it out there to the Spiritist community, to the spiritualist community, to the Spiritistas out there. Y'all need to come for your boy, and we need to update this particular piece to figure out how we can say this better. We need to say this better, because this is not working for me. It's not working for me. It's not working for a lot of people. Okay. We have a prayer for that moment of imminent danger. So this will be something that through the dangers we face, God reminds us of our weakness and the fragility of our existence, showing us that our life is in God's hands and that we are upheld by a thread that may snap at any moment when we least expect it. And from this point of view, no one is privileged, because both great and small are subject to the same alternatives. If one examines the nature and consequences of of the danger, one will see that most often such consequences, if they have occurred, are punishment for either a wrong committed or a duty neglected. Mm. 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 So yeah, that's I don't need to elaborate that. Anyone who has been in a life-threatening situation, or has missed death by the skin of their teeth, anyone knows that the words that you say in those moments are, oh my God, or please God, or help me God. You know damn well every atheist becomes a believer at that moment, right? um So we also have a prayer for having escaped danger. So by means of the dangers we go through, God shows us that we can at any moment be called to render an accounting for the use we are making of our life. He here thereby warns us that we may focus ourselves and mend our ways. So this particular prayer is in those moments that I just explained, right? When you escape death by the skin of your teeth. What they're explaining here, what the Spiritist perspective is to help to remind you of just how insignificant yet important you are, right? And how quickly it can all just go away. That no one is guaranteed the next day, no one is privileged in the eyes of death. It's all going to come for us, that kind of thing. And that specifically when you survive it, it is a message from God saying, you need to take an accounting of your life right the fuck now. You need to go back to all your diaries, read everything you wrote. You need to go through the photo album, remember everything. You need to sit with yourself and really reevaluate, reaccount for who the person you have been up to this point. Because what I just did to you was the death of that person. So you need to figure out who you are now. That's basically what it said here. That's what the Spiritist point of view of escaping death, what it stands for. We have a prayer for sleep. So with sleep is the repose of the body, but the spirit does not need repose. While the senses are numbed, the soul partially frees itself from matter and enjoys its faculties as a spirit. Sleep was given to human beings to restore their organic and mental energies. While the body recuperates the energy spent during the waking state, the spirit renews itself amongst other spirits from what it sees and hears, and also from the counsels of other spirits. It draws ideas that, upon waking, come to it in the form of intuitions. Sleep is the temporary return of the exile to its true homeland. It is the prisoner momentarily given back its freedom. However, as happens with the wicked prisoner, the spirit does not always take advantage of this moment of freedom for its advancement. If it harbors bad instincts, then instead of seeking the company of good spirit, it goes looking for its equals and visits places where it can give free rein to its inclinations. May those who are aware of this truth lift their thought at the moment when they feel sleep approaching. May they appeal to the counsel of good spirits and those whose memory is dear to them, so they may go to meet them during the short space that is granted. And upon waking, they will feel stronger against evil and more courageous against adversity. Listen, if y'all didn't already know this, we aren't mediums only when we are awake. Did I set off a bomb in people's brain? Because I feel like sometimes I do. Like when it's time to talk about the types of magic and the types of abilities and the types of things that we can engage in while we're sleeping and in our dream state, it is like people are hearing it for the first time. Which reminds me, There is an amazing class going on right now from a dear friend of mine, okay? And it is a class about dreaming, specifically for mediums and individuals who are initiates of the ATRs. And this man is a brilliant man. Anyone who is interested in that class, DM me, send me a message so that I can give you his information. Actually, fuck it. Let me see if I can find it here. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can find it here and pull it up for you guys. I don't know why my mouse is acting stupid here. Let me just do this real quick for you guys, because he is a brilliant person and a really, really nice person. And what he will teach you will absolutely, fuck. There we go. Sorry. Excuse my language. Okay, where is it? Dreaming in the Deep. That's what it's called. Dreaming in the Deep by Ogon Craig Ballard. The next class he's going to be giving it is going to be September 18th. So that is coming, actually. That is like right around the corner. It is, from what I see here, it's a very long course, like an intensive course, a sit-in. And the registration is $250. And you can find him on Facebook. Let me see if I can. I can't seem to share it. It doesn't matter. Just message me if you're interested in that class. It's totally worth it, I promise. So we also have a prayer upon sensing the approach of death, right? So having faith in the future and uplifting one's thoughts regarding one's future destiny aid the quick disengagement of the spirit as it weakens the ties that are holding it to the body. And quite often, corporal life has not yet expired, when the impatient soul has already begun soaring toward the great beyond. On the other hand, for people who have concentrated all of their thoughts on material things, these ties are more tenacious. So the separation is more difficult and painful, and the awakening beyond the grave is filled with trouble and anxiety. So this prayer is said usually over a person who is passing away, during that transition, when they're already starting to kind of see things and sense things. Those will be the prayers that will be said over the person. Then we have a section called prayers for others, right? And so this is a prayer for when someone is in affliction. So when we use this prayer, if it is in the interest of the afflicted person for his or her trial to follow its course, it will not be shortened at our request. Did everyone get that? So, meaning, if someone is reaping the consequences of their mistakes, if someone is reaping the karma of a past life, and it was intended for them to do that in order for their spirit to progress, we cannot intervene with that. How do you know? Divination. You will know by divining that person to find out if what they're going through is what they need to go through, or if you can help. If in the situation that you can help, right, then we'll get into some of these things. And just know, even if you decide to help knowing that you're going against their karma, it's not going to take. It won't take anyway. Because once again, all through God, right? Everything through God first. Anyway, so it won't shorten the request, but it would be an act of faithfulness to become disheartened because the request was not granted. All right. So moreover, even if the trial does not cease, one can hope to receive some other consolation that mitigates its bitterness. Okay, what is truly useful for the one who is suffering is courage and resignation, without which the trial is unprofitable, because it will have to be recommenced. Thus, it is for this purpose that one must especially direct one's efforts, whether by appealing to good spirits for help for the afflicted, or by rebuilding the afflicted person's morale through counsels and encouragements, or lastly, by materially assisting the person if possible. In this case, prayer may have a direct effect by directing a fluidic current upon the person for moral strength. So I need you to kind of listen to that, because this applies to pretty much any case that someone is coming to you for to help them with. You have a couple of ways to address this. You can pray to the good spirits and appeal to them on behalf of the other person. Okay. You can, encourage the person, give them positive affirmations, really be a morale boost and an ego boost for them to help them get through this tough time. Or if you have the means to do so, you can materially help them in whatever way they might need help to get through their period of suffering. So really what's being said here is that this prayer is good no matter what. The prayer will be heard by good spirits to at least help lessen the suffering, but the prayer is not intended to stop someone's intended karma. Okay? If it's meant to be stopped, if that was just a situation of bad luck or just something that they, got from someone else or whatever, these prayers will remove them, along with a few other procedures, which I will not get into here. We also have a prayer for a benefit granted to someone else. So this is when those who are not dominated by selfishness rejoice over the good received by their neighbor, even when it has not been asked for through prayer. Okay. So again, celebrating other people's wins, right? We pray for our enemies and those who wish ill upon us. This is actually one of our favorite things to do. Us spiritists, we love to pray for our enemies because we know how prayer manifests for our enemies, right? But, Jesus said, love your enemies, right? So this maxim reveals to us what is the most sublime Christian charity, and that is love thy neighbor, right? However, with it, Jesus does not mean that we must have the same affection for our enemies as we have for our friends. So don't get it twisted, all right? With these words, he tells us to forget their offenses, to forgive the harm they have done to us, to repay their harm with goodness. And besides the merit of this in God's eyes, it shows others what is truly superior, because it takes a very strong person to do that. Let's see. We also say prayers for a benefit that was granted to our enemies, right? So even when there are enemies, if something good happens to them, we rejoice for them as well. And it's not done, in a snarky, subliminal, passive aggressive kind of way. Like, it is sincere, because again, these are just tiny itty bitty little nuggets in the jar of that person's spiritual progress, right? They may not know it. They may not see it right away. They may not attribute it to you in this lifetime. Whatever, that's not the point, right? So we're not wishing one's enemies ill. It's true charity consists in wishing what is good for them and being happy for them, And then we also have prayers for the actual enemies of Spiritism itself. Now, what we mean by enemies of Spiritism is usually people who will try and sort of intellectualize their way out of it, and will try and come and test and like, come and cross their arms and be like, show me, and like that kind of stuff. We pray for those people because we know that no matter how much they ask for proof and evidence, no matter how much they challenge, their ears are not ready to hear. They don't want to hear with an open ear. They don't want to hear with an open heart, right? They just want to argue. And so we pray for that. And we also pray for the fact that they are spending so much energy investing in questioning the validity of our practices, because what that says is that they've made it to the front door. They've at least made it to the front door, and they're knocking. They're knocking hard. But every time we open the door, they just stand there and they're like, no, we're not coming in. And that's okay. But at least they made it to the door, and we pray for that as well. We're like, all right, at least you got to the door. You're talking a lot of shit at the door, but at least you're there. Okay? So for this part, we're going to quote Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah. Matthew chapter 5, verse 6 and verse 10 through 12. And we're also going to quote Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. And here it said, "Blessed are they who hunger for justice, for they shall be filled. Blessed are they who suffer persecution for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men slander you and persecute you and wrongly say all sorts of evils against you for my sake. Rejoice, therefore, for a great recompense is reserved for you in heaven, because in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear the one who cannot destroy both soul and body in hell." So, of all the freedoms, the most inviolable is that of thought, which also includes freedom of consciousness. Casting anathemas against those who do not think as we do is to demand such freedom for ourselves while refusing it to others, thus violating Jesus' first commandment, charity and love for one's neighbor. So to persecute them for their belief is to attack the most sacred right that all people have of believing in what is fit for them and worshiping God according to their understanding. Obliging them to outward acts like our own is to show that we are bound more to form than to content, to appearances than to conviction. Forced renouncement never brings faith. It produces only hypocrisy. It is an abuse of material power that does not demonstrate the truth. And the truth is secure in and of itself. It convinces and does not persecute because it does not need to. Spiritism is an opinion, a belief. Even if it were a religion, why would persons not have as much freedom to say they are Spiritists as they would have to say they are Catholics, Jews, and Protestants? Adherents of this or that philosophy or this or that economic system. A belief is either false or true. If it is false, it would fall by itself, because error cannot prevail against the truth when minds are enlightened. And if it is true, persecution will not render it false. Persecution is the baptism for every new idea that is great and just. It increases with the greatness and importance of an idea. The animosity and wrath of its enemies are in proportion to the fear that it instills in them. It is for this reason that Christianity was persecuted in the past and why Spiritism is today. But with the difference that Christianity was persecuted by pagans, whereas Spiritism is persecuted by Christians, The times of bloody persecutions have passed. That is true. But if one no longer kills the body, one torments the soul, attacking it in its innermost sentiments, in its dearest affections. Families are divided. Mother is incited against daughter, wife against husband. Even the body is attacked in its physical needs by taking away people's livelihood in order to subdue them through hunger. Spiritists, do not be troubled with the blows you are dealt, for they prove that you have the truth. Otherwise, you would be left alone and not harmed. It is a test of your faith, for it will be because of your courage, resignation, and perseverance that God will acknowledge you to be among God's faithful servants, and of whom God is even now making note, so as to give all their share according to their deeds. Therefore, following the example of the early Christians, be proud to carry your cross. Believe in the words of Christ, who said, "Blessed are they who suffer persecution for righteousness, and for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul." He also said, "Love your neighbors, do good to those who do evil, and pray for those who persecute you. Show that you are his true disciples and that your doctrine is good by doing what he said and what he himself did. Persecution will last only for a little while, so wait patiently for the dawn, for already the morning star appears on the horizon." Mm, 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 mm. Damn, y'all, this is a long ass chapter. I've already been going for a while. Let me see what else we got going on here. Prayer for a child, prayer for a dying person. Okay, prayers for a child and prayers for a dying person, and then we'll call it a day. Okay? So, prayer for a newborn child. So, when spirits reach perfection, only after having passed through the trials of corporal life, those in the spirit world wait for God to allow them to take up another existence that will furnish them a means of advancement, either through the expiation of their past wrongs by means of the vicissitudes they must endure, or by fulfilling a mission that is useful to humankind. Their advancement and future happiness will be proportional to the manner in which they will have employed the time they must spend on the earth. The duty of guiding their first steps and of directing them toward the good is entrusted to their parents, who will answer to God for the way they will have fulfilled their mandate. It is in order to facilitate its execution that God made parental and filial love a law of nature, a law that is never violated with impunity. Okay? And then the prayer for a dying person. So, dying is the prelude to the separation of the soul from the body. One could say that at the moment, the person has only one foot in this world and that he or she already has the foot in the other world. This passage is sometimes painful for those who are deeply attached to matter and who have lived more for possessions of this world than for those of the other, or those whose conscience is troubled by grief and remorse. On the contrary, for those whose thoughts are lifted up to the infinite and who are detached from matter, the ties are easier to break, and the final moments are in no way painful. Hence, the soul is connected to the body only by a thread, whereas in the first case, it is held by deep roots. In any case, however, prayer exerts a powerful action on the effort of separation. All right, guys. I am going to put a pin in it for now and leave questions open now. So questions, we can get into all kinds of stuff. This was a very meaty chapter, and it's actually still not done. So we are going to, continue moving forward for the next round. Let me unshare my screen here. Hello, hello. Okay. All right. So how are we feeling? How are we feeling? Does anyone have any questions before I let you guys go? By the way, Perez, if you're still in here, great comments. Great comments. Loved it. Mm. So Caroline A. Ramirez, how do you connect with your spirit guides? So that is a super loaded question because the category of spirit guides is so vast, you know. Um, so my recommendation would be to start with your guardian spirit guide first. All right. Some people call it the guardian angel, your protector spirit. But basically the spirit that's assigned to you at birth, you start with that one if you're trying to connect to your spirit guides. Now, as a question overall, in terms of like the methodology of how to connect to your spirit guides, that is something you will have to take one of my classes for, because that is, again, a very complex answer. But to give you a short and sweet one, the best way, in my personal opinion, to connect to your spirit guides would be through meditation and through dreaming, in my opinion. Hopefully that answered your question. Yay! Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, my lovely people. I love you guys so much. Thank you once again for joining me for our book club. I think I'm going to host the book club only on Tuesdays, because I'm noticing that Thursdays just keep getting booked. Just something keeps coming up every Thursday. And Tuesday seems to be the only day that the book club does not get interrupted. So I definitely want to continue this on Tuesdays. Caroline, a great question. So how do you get info on my classes? So you can find anything and everything you need about me, about my stuff, all by typing in the magical solution into Google. My website will pop up. All of my social medias will pop up. And you can follow me everywhere. And on my website, if you go in there, there's a tab called services. And in that tab, you'll find all the classes that I offer, the readings that I offer, et cetera, et cetera. Now, mind you, there is a bunch of classes that are going to be coming up that I have not put in there yet. So make sure that when you go into the website, you subscribe to my newsletter so that you can get those updates, okay? Hopefully that answered your question. And do I do readings? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I do both, like readings, regular readings, and I also do mediumship readings, and I also do spiritual court readings, investigations. So any of those things that you might need, you can let me know and we'll schedule you an appointment, okay? All right, guys, thank you so much. I will see you next Tuesday and we will keep it going. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, share, all the things that you need to do to support a small content creator. And most importantly, remember that this is how we grow.